Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Charles Stone, and I have the honor of serving as the Vice Chair of the Caltrain Board of Directors. On behalf of Chair Steve Heminger, who wishes he could be here today, the board, and the entire organization, it is my great pleasure to welcome Governor Gavin Newsom, State Senator Bob Wieckowski, and Santa Clara Mayor Lisa Gilmore here to the historic Santa Clara Caltrain Station, which also houses the wonderful South Bay Historical Railroad Society. It's an exciting time to be in transportation, with renewed attention and visionary leadership working toward a more sustainable and equitable transportation system. The governor's proposed budget includes a desperately needed $9.1 billion investment in transportation and infrastructure, including billions for transit and rail projects. And as the kids say, we at Caltrain are here for it. The proposed budget also includes over $1 billion for our ports and billions for the transition to zero-emission vehicles. Speaking of zero-emission vehicles, we at Caltrain are laser-focused on the completion of our electrification project, a transformational project that will be the state of California's first ever electrified commuter rail system spanning 51 miles between San Francisco and San Jose. Caltrain electrification will modernize our 150-year-old and fast-aging diesel fleet and replace it, 3/4 of it, with brand new, high-performance electric trains. And this is exciting. We will begin testing those trains in just the next few months. We expect to be in revenue service by 2024, at which time the electrified Caltrain corridor will carry the equivalent of 5 lanes of US 101 traffic, but without the greenhouse gas emissions and their devastating effect on our climate and our environment. Looking farther into the future, we believe the electrification project will lay the foundation for our state's coming high-speed rail system, which will propel California to the forefront of our nation when it comes to transportation. We at Caltrain are so grateful to Governor Newsom and the legislature for working hard with us so far on this journey, and we look forward to working closely with him and the legislature to carry Caltrain electrification over the finish line. And with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce the Mayor of Santa Clara, Lisa Gilmore.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the City of Santa Clara. I'd like to welcome the Governor. He's no stranger to the City of Santa Clara. And Senator Wieckowski, our special guests here today, as well as our Railroad Society for hosting us this morning. The Governor picked the perfect place today to speak on transportation and infrastructure. I want to tell you a little bit about Santa Clara and what this means to us, his proposals. The Governor knows that Santa Clara, we have strategic initiatives that support the governor's efforts to advance of climate and public health calls while addressing supply chain congestion and accelerating the transition to zero-emission vehicles. The city of Santa Clara is positioned well with both major transportation systems. In addition to our Caltrain station, we're excited to partner with BART on a new major transit connection coming to Santa Clara. Santa Clara, which is one of the most prominent job centers in the entire Bay Area and the data center capital of the West Coast and second in the nation. The combination of Caltrain, which is focused on electrification, and a BART station allows for workers to use a cleaner transportation and come to Santa Clara while reducing emissions. These projects create jobs, and Santa Clara is known for leading in sustainability and policy to address climate change. We're excited about the additional opportunities for clean transportation and investment through the governor's plan. As the only Bay Area city with its full-service electric utility, Silicon Valley Power, Santa Clara has committed millions of dollars to electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure. And because zero emissions isn't just about cars, we've even invested in a pilot program to increase the use of electric bicycles in our community. We know that in order to transition to zero-emission vehicles, bicycles are going to play a key role in that effort. The governor's plan to invest in community-based equity projects would allow for Santa Clara to build out improved bike paths and expand their use. We're very excited to see the state's continued commitment to clean transportation, and Santa Clara has already made great efforts in this category. These initiatives continue California and Santa Clara's path as a leader in clean transportation and the fight against climate change. The City of Santa Clara supports the Governor's California Blueprint, and we applaud his efforts to invest in California's transportation and infrastructure. And with that, I'd like to introduce our very own State Senator Bob Wachowski for his remarks. Thank you.
Well, good morning. Governor, congratulations on the robust and the forward-looking January budget that's been proposed. As you folks know, this is the beginning of the budget negotiations between the legislature and the governor's office. There's a lot in here to like. Obviously, the Senate has had their opinions on what we should be doing in the ZEV domain and how we should move that forward, but $6.1 billion in addition to the work that we did last year. Last year really set a foundation, and some of that money has not gone out the door and will be repurposed, but other programs, ding, 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 are being proposed by the governor. We're going to sit down. This is going to be an arduous and tough fight that's coming ahead with all this money. You know, I was elected, as the governor was, when we didn't have any money, and now we got a lot of money, so we have a lot of choices to make. But transportation, we've all heard the facts, control 40% of our greenhouse gases, and we've got to do a better job in the short term between now and 2030 to make sure that we meet that 40% target. So the investments into school buses, the investment into transit buses, you know, we'd like to see a little bit more program funding so that all our transportation agencies know how much money they're going to get and they can start planning it. But that's what the budget process is. Next Wednesday, I start my first hearing in this domain. We'll be talking about high-speed rail and what's going to be happen there. I'm a proud Bronco graduate from law school, and I'm sure that all of you know that in 1989, Gavin Newsom graduated from Santa Clara, a star left-handed pitcher, a star academician, and a visionary. Somebody, you know, we Santa Clara Broncos come up with ideas. We push the envelope. Those Jesuits really instill us with ideas. So it's my pleasure to announce to you the governor, or introduce to you the governor of the state of California, Gavin Newsom.
Thanks, Senator. By the way, I can't tell you how many hours I was on those trains back and forth from Santa Clara back home into San Francisco. So it's nice to be here with you, Senator. It's wonderful to be here with you, Madam Mayor. I'm grateful to be here with each and every one of you and those that are responsible for fulfilling a vision that we've been talking about for almost 20 years. I'm glad to hear that our notes compare favorably in terms of getting things moving finally in terms of the revenue in 2024 on the electrification. That said, I recognize we have a little bit of work to do to fill that gap, that $400 million or so gap that remains, and we continue to have no greater champion than Speaker Nancy Pelosi to help advance that cause. But today we're talking about a different cause of sorts, and that's the cause here that unites all of those behind me and many of us in this state, and that's the cause of advancing a California framework so that we can future-proof this state. We are deeply, we understand deeply the challenges that we face as a state as it relates to extremes, extreme drought, extreme weather, the ravages and realities of climate change. And so much of this transportation focus, as the Senator laid out, is framed in the context of resiliency, is framed in the context of our climate agenda. There is an integration, an intentionality in this year's budget to focus on bringing together issues related to climate, health, economic development, workforce development, and no greater place to connect those dots than the areas of infrastructure and notably transportation. As was noted, this year we have submitted to the legislature for consideration $9.1 billion additional resources in a new transit package. As was noted by the Senator, one of the most interesting and significant components of that is the commitment we're making over a 2-year period, $10 billion. $10 billion investment in zero-emission vehicles. I want to put that in perspective. With pride, we're the beneficiary of what is estimated to be $384 million. $384 million over 5 years from the federal infrastructure package for zero-emission vehicles. $384 million, we're grateful. That's a record amount of money coming from the federal government for zero-emission vehicles. But we are committing as a state, if we're successful with the additional budget requests this year and whatever the legislature looks to add on, $10 billion to advance that cause over the next number of years. So there is no state in America that comes close to a commitment of radically changing our system of transportation by cleaning and greening it, particularly as it relates to incentives across the spectrum and the capacity now through grant programs, matching and otherwise, to begin the process that we have long been advancing around converting our drayage trucks, converting our diesel trucks, converting passenger vehicles, continuing to incentivize for low-income purchases those same vehicles through our Clean Cars for All program, the commitment to do the same for our public education system writ large, but particularly for school buses. And so this package includes not only the passenger trucks, heavy and medium-sized trucks, but also includes the infrastructure that can power that transition. Billions and billions of dollars for charging points, efforts around not just the passenger and the commercial side, but the industrial side as it relates to decarbonization as well, supporting supply chain, as was noted. $2.3 billion, by the way, is in this budget for ports specifically, 1.2 for infrastructure-related supply chain, and then $1 billion plus for workforce and other related supports related to the supply chain. We're grateful. We saw Secretary Buttigieg out here earlier in this week down in Los Angeles. We're grateful for some of the support we've received from the federal government. But again, those supports dwarf the supports that we are advancing here as a state to continue our efforts to lead in this transition. As the senator noted, and it's important to remind everybody, while it's absolutely right, as the senator noted, that 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions in the state of California come from tailpipe emissions. If you add up extraction for vehicles, it's north of 50% of all of our greenhouse gas emissions come from the transportation sector. If you're going to get serious about decarbonizing and radically changing the way we produce and consume energy and advancing our goals, as the senator was noting, you can't do it without radically transforming your transportation sector. And that's why we were the first state in America to require all purchases of new vehicles in California to be alternatively fueled, to be zero-emission vehicles by 2035. We announced that a little over a year ago at a time when we were out on a limb and on our own. What's remarkable over the course of the last year, year and a half, is not only how many other jurisdictions around the globe have attached themselves to that goal, but how Ford Motor Company, GM, and other automobile manufacturers, some of the largest in the world, have also aligned substantially with that goal. And so this market's moving. Policy is an accelerator. California continues to lead. We're not playing in the margins. And we are taking our efforts to a whole new level if we're successful, and I'm confident we will be with this budget proposal and all of the additional nuances and adjustments that will be made during the legislative process, which I look forward to over the course of now and the May revise, and ultimately as we advance this budget more formally mid-year. So that's the foundational principle that brings us here, to focus on transportation, to focus on infrastructure, to focus on historic investments. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention just two other things. But first, I do want to acknowledge that the federal government, in addition to the money that is forthcoming on electric vehicles, is providing more broadly in our transportation sector some $40 billion for this state over the next 5 years across a spectrum of supports, $25.3 billion specifically just for highways, just shy of $10 billion for rail, passenger rail projects in this state. There is so much to be grateful for, again, in the spirit of acknowledging leadership of Speaker Pelosi. I want to also acknowledge the entire congressional delegation, particularly down here in the South Bay, for their remarkable leadership, for Mayor Liccardo's remarkable leadership in this space, and of course the President and the Vice President for affording us the privilege of being able to attach ourselves to $40 billion of additional package of supports over the next 5 years across the spectrum. It has been said often, and it is absolutely true, there are parts of the state where there are potholes that are old enough to qualify for Medicare. The issue around deferred maintenance, the issue around lack of capital investments is self-evident to anyone that lives in this state or visits the state, but we are poised in a position we haven't been in well over a decade, with unprecedented, at least in the last decade, investments coming out of our general fund, federal government investments, and the support, thank you, of the people of the state of California, where they upheld the principles that were advanced, the great work of the senator and his colleagues through SB 1, that set aside of over $5 billion, consistent set aside of resources to improve our bridges and improve our infrastructure across the state of California. So we all recognize what we all experience and see, but I want folks in the state of California to know that this state is at a whole another level of investment over many, many years to improve the infrastructure, to improve the connectivity in the state, north and south, regionally, and we're very, very proud of that collective effort. High-speed rail was mentioned, just briefly. $4.2 billion is being requested of the legislature to finish the job, to get that first phase done between 3 dynamic cities in the state of California, 3 cities that we should spend more time learning about and visiting and connecting to. And a big part of our broader strategy is to connect the Central Valley, Central Coast, Northern California, Southern California, the entire state of California. As we roar, these engines roar, California's strength is when we look to each other, support each other, and we advance our collective efforts together. And so this notion of the high-speed rail is about connecting those dots, and we continue to not only advance the cause between Bakersfield and Merced, but continue to finish the work, which is just months away in the vast majority of cases. All the environmental work will be completed in terms of the northern terminus and the central, or rather the Southern California terminus, just in the next few months. A lot of the environmental review work will be specifically done down to Palmdale, parts of Burbank and LA, and of course the work up here, San Jose, down or up north to San Francisco. So progress is being made there, and I'll just remind you, there's an additional, and if I've lost you, it's because you're paying attention. If I haven't lost you, you've not paid attention. There's an additional, separate $50 billion of competitive grants that are out there that we're going to go after like a train running through the station. We're going to aggressively go after those $50 billion of federal monies under a competitive process to draw down more support for our regional connections north and south and our high-speed rail program. And to those of you that have followed the Build Back Better program, there's $10 billion specifically set aside for those efforts if indeed that bill becomes law in the state. So that's why we're here. Gratitude, Madam Mayor, thank you for all your leadership, and thank you for the acknowledgement of Santa Clara being quite familiar to me. So many of my great memories established here, and of course, Bob, you and I both know how extraordinary the anchor institution here in Santa Clara is, Santa Clara University, and all the extraordinary talent they convey. May not be the two of us, but many others every single day, every year rather, in this region. So with that, we're here to happy to answer any question on this topic, and I imagine some other subjects that may be top of mind today as well.
Hi, Governor. This is Eliyahu Kamisher from the Mercury News. About high-speed rail funding, your budget doubles
Hold on
down.
one sec. They're going to turn up the mic. I don't know if someone's just purposely in there turning that engine on. You're almost, you have to just wonder. But anyway,
Can you hear me?
there you go. That's better. Thank you.
This is Eliyahu Kamisher from the Mercury News. Your budget doubles down on the high-speed rail funding that was left out of your the previous final budget. What do you think is different this time, and how are you going to be able to push that through?
Well, we're going to get it done. I mean, God's delays are not God's denials. We're going to drive it. Otherwise, you have an erector set with pieces that aren't even complete. Whose interest is that? No one's. Let's get the job done. Let's finish the Central Valley component. Let's continue the work north and south. Let's provide more resources, as this budget does, for regional projects that will connect to the anchor project in the Central Valley. Let's fulfill the vision, particularly here, Central Valley to Silicon Valley, which I think is one of the most exciting components of that high-speed rail project, the jobs, housing components, the issues around economic development and workforce development. Those opportunities present themselves anew once we get that first phase done and we continue to advance the subsequent phases in parallel. And so that's the vision, that's the goal. But I don't want to run the 90-yard dash on it. And so the voters set aside the money for this purpose, want to get those dollars out under Prop 1A and finish that job, do it in a thoughtful and judicious way. I've only been here 3 years, can't make up for that previous decade, but we can be accountable to finishing that phase and continuing the work to prepare for these subsequent phases. Yeah, I will have that information will be out very shortly and over the course of the next few hours. But that decision's been made, and we will be providing. We'll be putting out that statement in detail, the detailed statement in the next later this afternoon. Thank you.
Governor, this is Kit Doe with KPIX5. Two-part question. We've seen a lot of these large infrastructure projects, from the Bay Bridge to the Central Subway Station in San Francisco, go long and go over budget.
Some golden oldies there. Very
yeah. How much confidence should the public have that this is not going to continue with high-speed rail? And also, secondly, do you think we'll see high-speed rail in your lifetime?
Well, we're seeing it. I see it I was down on the 5 yesterday, driving north-south, went to a beautiful town, Lamont, yesterday, in the Central Valley. Great history there with farm workers. And you see the progress every time I drive in the valley of the high-speed rail. So yes, the answer is yes, I expect to see that. We're going to get it done. Merced Bakersfield, we're going to continue to fight for more regional and dollars to build out the infrastructure so we can connect the dots into the future, and we'll continue to work with our federal partners. But the reality is the hand that was dealt when I got here 3 years ago is a little bit different than the original vision in terms of the resources that remain and the capacity to deliver on the original vision with those now more limited resources. So we're trying to get things done, move things forward in a systemic way, an appropriate way, and provide value for those dollars. And that's what we're charged to do. And that's what our focus is and will continue to be.
Hi, good morning, Governor. Margie Schaefer with KCBS. I've just got a couple COVID questions. The first, regarding schools, you sent rapid tests to schools. Teachers are calling for more regular testing programs.
And forgive me,
Okay.
There we
They
go.
revved. Okay.
If you could offer that question, forgive us.
So you sent the rapid test to schools. Teachers are calling for more regular testing. Are you considering providing regular tests? Would that be a good tool to keep?
Well, I want to
schools
remind
open?
everybody, in fact, as of this morning, 13 million tests have arrived, over-the-counter tests, just in the last month to our public schools. It's not an indictment. It's not a critique. It's just a point of comparative contrast. The Biden administration is talking about 10 million tests for the country. At the end of the month, we provided 13 million tests just in the state in the last month. We want to continue to provide more support, more testing for our schools. That said, and this is important to note, that's additive to the baseline testing that's been established. We have 4,400 schools that are active in our baseline testing program. And we have partnerships, including the 60 to 80,000 tests that come out of one of our state-owned labs, Valencia Labs in Southern California, with many of the school districts across the state. And we want to continue those partnerships, continue to advance that baseline testing in our public schools. We've added on top of that these over-the-counter tests, and we'll continue to do everything in our power to provide more tests as we compete with the federal government for access to those tests. The good news, we punch above our weight. It's the state of California, fifth largest economy in the world, and that's why we continue not only to provide on a daily and weekly basis more tests, but also more masks. And this is something I want to highlight. California has now provided 14.5 million N95 masks to our public schools just in the last few weeks. Over 1 billion units of PPE have been provided to schools and community institutions from local health jurisdictions over the course of the last year or so. But specifically 14.5 million in the last few weeks. That said, we have more work to do in that space. There are many districts that have yet to receive those masks that they have specifically ordered, but we have a brand new website up over the Office of Emergency Service, a portal where they can get those N95s in particular at no costs. I'm really proud of that. Again, we're uniquely positioned to be able to provide those supports. So it's testing, but that's not it. It's masking, it's testing, it's all the protocols that we have established over the course of last year and a half, the $5.3 billion that we put up specifically for improving infrastructure and ventilation. That was part of the early actions we took with the Senator and others over the course of last year. All those dollars being at work to keep our kids, most importantly, keep them safely in person, in school, and that continues to be our top priority, including the reason why we did an executive order 2 days ago to provide more flexibility, to provide more support for substitute teachers, and to provide more support for schools that need more staffing so we can get through the next few weeks, which we all acknowledge will be a challenging few weeks, so we can get to the other side and we will have a successful 180-day in-person instruction school year, which is the intention we all have for our kids in every part of the state.
Related to that, should schools have a backup plan to go back to distance learning? I mean, instead of just repeating.
I'm sorry. This was done because I apparently didn't say thank you to a member of my staff or something. I'm going to find out what happened. People watching at home have no idea, but this is surround sound. Forgive me, I can't hear you.
Yeah, okay. Should schools have a backup plan to go back to distance learning instead of just repeating what they say, we're going to stay open no matter what? I mean, what if, as you mentioned, there aren't enough teachers to run the joint?
I want kids in school. We want them safely in-person instruction, and the overwhelming majority of the schools are working through this. And let me just acknowledge, it's not easy. I want to thank the superintendents, school leaders. I want to thank the line staff, the bus drivers. I want to thank the cafeteria workers. I want to thank the folks that are getting kids in the Caltran behind me to school every day. It takes, well, I don't want to say a village, but it takes all of us. And there's just nothing more important than the social emotional components of being in person in school. We've extended, this budget we put out, $102 billion, record, unprecedented, record-breaking budget, state of California, to reimagine the public education system. Created a brand new grade. It's not K through 12 anymore. I even have to disabuse myself. I talk about K through, it's pre-K 12. We put a brand new grade, fully funding that the next couple of years. We are providing supports we only have dreamt of. I mean, there have been initiatives, there's been governors over the last, 2 decades have been talking about after school for all and summer school. We're doing it. We're delivering on that, extending the school days, extending the school years. We're going to get that instruction in. We'll work through this. I know it's trying and challenging, and I have great respect and empathy for those every day are working through this very difficult period. And it's not just our schools. It's, as you know well, it's our hospitals, our healthcare system writ large. This is a challenging time. The next few weeks will be challenging, but we can get through this. We will get through it. And I want to do it in a way that does justice to the principles and the importance, the imperative of keeping our kids safe and keeping them safely in school.
Okay, 11 prison staff have died in 2020, 38 in 2021. You're mandating vaccines for healthcare workers, teachers. Why not prison staff?
Well, we have similar state rules for all state workers that require vaccine and/or testing. Our corrections officers are tested twice a week, many state employees just once. We have vaccine rates north of 70% for that staff and 100% requirement for healthcare staff at CDCR. And while we've seen number of people positive substantially lower within the system, a little over 3,000 as of today, roughly a population of 100,000, a smaller percentage than community spread at CDCR. It's the top priority to focus on the mitigation of that spread. That's why we've modified movement within the system and intake, and we continue to require, as you know well, N95 masking for all of our CDCR staff that are in those settings. Accordingly, we continue to do what best we can to mitigate the more extreme impacts of the Omicron variant, and as a consequence, while it's correct, you noted some of the more extreme and unfortunate effects of this pandemic on our prison population in the past. We are not seeing that kind of acuity of hospitalizations today with the patient population within the prisons that have been impacted by Omicron.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
What do you say to people that will see this and be critical that this money is being spent towards transportation when we have these urgent, teacher shortages, businesses failing, and is it maybe frustrating for you to have this big pot of money earmarked that you can't use for these crises that we're facing right now?
Well, the good news is I want to disabuse people of that. Quite the contrary, in fact. $2.9 billion for teacher retention, professional development, $2.9 billion teacher retention, professional development, unprecedented investments in public education. Yesterday, we announced a $2.7 billion plan to deal with the immediate crisis around COVID, $1.4 billion early action that we're looking forward to presenting the senator and his colleagues for more staff, more masks, more tests, more boosters. So we're doing that and. So to the extent they're critics, I think what's critical for them is to learn more about what's in the budget, including the fact that we have one of the largest surpluses in our state's history. Why is that? Because of the incredible economic output in this state. This economy has grown faster in the last 5 years than any other Western democracy. Let me be more specific. No other Western democracy, the United States included, has outperformed California in economic growth in the last 5 years. We've outperformed Florida and Texas since the pandemic, as a just interesting aside. We also have outperformed the number of people that have died, a substantially lower percentage, 50% higher per capita death rate in Florida than the state of California, as an example, as our economic output has outperformed. Both go hand in hand. And so I'm really proud of that. More business startups in the state's history, and our budget includes hundreds of millions, in fact, no, billions and billions, because there's a $5.5 billion proposal for R&D tax credits and incentives for business. So I'm really pleased that we were able to do all of those things and invest in our growth engines, and that's our infrastructure, which is really part of the formula for the success of any democracy, including the state of California.
Got a question here.
You may not get the answer you want because it may be consistent with the one I provided yesterday and the day before.
So CPUC is meeting today. There's a big rally outside that meeting. How are you going to deal with competing interests? You've got rooftop solar folks and the green jobs that they provide. Big utilities don't want to compensate homeowners for their rooftop solar. You've got solar social justice groups who say that compensating homeowners is just another giveaway for the wealthy.
Yeah, it's complicated. I appreciate you framed it appropriately so. And as I said on Monday during the budget, as I said yesterday at 2 stops, one in San Diego and one in Los Angeles, we look forward to working through those issues and see where we can land, and there'll be more to say on this very, very shortly. Appreciate it. Thank you all.